I think that the Friends of Syria conference didn't bring any major surprise. Why? Because we knew before that the Syrian government had officially at least agreed to the terms of the Annan plan. We have seen also that some opponents or some participants to the conference were more reluctant with consolidating the action of Kofi Annan because they consider that anyway diplomacy is something that can't work with the Syrian regime. But taken as a whole, I would say that anyway, the Annan plan is one thing, and the nature of the disposition that will allow this Annan plan to enter into force is another thing. To say it another way, I think that it isn't necessarily a wise idea to focus on the Friends of Syria conference to see if we should go further with the Annan peace plan or no. I think that what should remain the rule is just passing through the United Nations and allowing the United Nations, and especially the United Nations Security Council, to state on the Syrian situation and to go how to move forward. Why? Because if we remain out of a sole and official UN cycle, the problem will be that a lot of actors will stand against any solution that could be negotiated or any solution that could be proposed. And so the result, I think, could be, on the one hand, more violence that would keep on the Syrian ground, and on the other hand, no solution that could bring a consensus between all the actors that are interested by solving the situation crisis. I think that one clear thing is that Kofi Annan's mission was far from being easy, and I think that a lot of people acknowledge on the fact that he had the courage, and he also had a strong belief when he decided or when he agreed to go to Syria to speak with the Syrian regime, especially considering that the Syrian regime can be so radical in its appreciation of the situation that it won't allow, or it will hardly allow, anybody to tell it this is the plan that you should put into application, and there is no opportunity for discussing any of its points. So taken as a whole, he had a very hard mission. At the same time, I mean, we can see that Kofi Annan may be a good person or a good choice because he is used to diplomacy and he has followed or dealt from close with the Syrian regime when he was in his function at the head of the UN. But that said, I would say let us believe in this plan, and even though I am not sure it will be the solution for the Syrian crisis, anyway, it is better to pass by a plan that is proposed by Kofi Annan either than going through other means that would put diplomacy aside. So since the beginning of the revolts in Syria, we've seen that some opponent groups have tried to organize and have tried to come with propositions, but the main problem, which existed before the 2011 events, remains the following. It is that you have a lot of individuals and a lot of groups that have constituted, and few of them agree with each other. So the Syrian National Council is now considered to be one of the strongest representatives of Syrian opponents, but at the same time we shouldn't forget that when it comes to opposition that is present outside of Syria, you have the Syrian National Council, but you also have other initiatives that have been created, and they pretend to hold the legitimacy. Not to forget that the Syrian National Council itself has, to a certain degree, split, and this is how we can see that there is no real coherence in the internal ranks of the Syrian National Council. And on the other hand, we also know, and I think that's the most important thing, that there are opponents that are acting in Syria. And these same opponents are trying to exist, are trying to show that they should be represented or considered as the real legitimate representatives of Syrian opposition. So taken as a whole, I think that one thing hasn't changed even with the Friends of Syria conference. It is the image of a fragmented opposition that doesn't really inspire any kind of trust when it comes to knowing how to compose with them. So some countries are considering that arming the Syrian rebels would be a solution to get rid of the Syrian regime. But I would say that when we look at the situation of some countries that are really very keen on putting Assad's regime away, or allowing it to fall, such as the United States, for example. Well, the United States want to get rid of Assad, but at the same time, they are the first to say we shouldn't arm opponents, because otherwise we will end in a civil war in Syria. And I think this is really the risk in Syria, because if the opposition was unified, if it had a clear program and clear principles, maybe arming it would allow it to strengthen and to make the difference towards the Syrian regime. But considering the actual circumstances, considering the reality of the ground, considering we shouldn't forget that the Syrian regime has made the difference till now when it comes to its struggle or its combat against its opponents, I would say that anyway, diplomacy remains the best solution. Not that it will solve the whole Syrian equation, but anyway, it would be a way of avoiding more victims on the Syrian ground.